Tonight on The GOAT Show.
I have to show you my thumb for it to pop up.
Look, why the fuck would I want a thumbs up emoji anyway?
It contracts and expands.
Interesting.
Well, we know muscle memory is a thing.
Boxing is also very superstitious.
Goats, all right, just accept yourself. Welcome to The GOAT Show, the show where we celebrate and debate all things great. I am joined by my co-hosts, Fresh and Deezy. Gentlemen, good to see you. Normally I ask you guys how you guys are doing, how you guys are feeling, but I'm going to tell you what. I'm feeling swole today, boys. I got these guns ready to go, especially because we have a guest today who I've known for a little while now, been following for quite a while, but we actually started training, actually hired this man as a trainer to help me get these guns, help get my shit together. Because, man, I was just laying in on that fast food. I was, not moving correctly.
Just out here being fat.
Just out here being a fat ass. So we're going to talk to him in a little bit. His name is Jay Vincent. We'll talk to him in a little bit. But before we do, Fresh, what do the people got to do today?
You got to like, you got to subscribe, you got to hit the bell, you got to comment, you got to send it to your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle.
Send it to the fatty in your life.
Send it to those incels, bro.
If you're a skinny ass incel or just a big fat video game playing lard ball, listen, no shame in the game. You can always change your life around. You can always find the right person to give you the right program to get you back on track. And today's guest, Jay Vincent, is someone that maybe we should zoom out a little bit. All right. Me personally, I've been on that seesaw since probably like 6 years old. I remember seeing a photo of me at 5 years old where I was like thin and healthy. And then at 6 years old, somehow, some way I gained 40. Well, I just got overweight 40 pounds, and it's been that way. It was that way till literally I met Jay and I started working on his program. I would lose here and there. I would get kind of fit. Then I would get, back on the seesaw. I try every kind of diet in the world. I try every kind of fitness routine in the world. I'd work out like nonstop for, however long. Then I'd hate myself and hate my life. I'd stop working out. Just that whole rigmarole that I think a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world have been on. And tried everything, tried every diet. And I can say with absolute certainty, because we'll be posting my results from a few months of training with Jay. It'll probably go up here somewhere. I've been getting these DEXA scans. Shout out Composition ID Orlando for getting these accurate DEXA scans. It tells you how much fat you have. It tells you how much muscle mass you have. It tells you how much water you have. All that kind of stuff. We'll post that up. We'll even make a link in the show notes for you guys to view for yourself. But long story short, been on that seesaw, met Jay in person in Florida in August. I think it was August. Started training together, and I have nothing but great things to say. So if you are struggling with your health, your fitness, you want to lose fat, you want to gain muscle, you want to eat normally again, then you got to check out none other than our guest today, Mr. Jay Vincent. Jay, what's going on, man? How you doing? How you feeling?
Same shit, different toilet. That's what I like to say.
All right, Jay, we have so much to talk about because, like I said, was following you for a while because this other gentleman, John Anthony, who some of you may have seen out there talking, I was following him, and then he recommended Jay for incels like me to get fit and do that whole thing. And I started watching Jay's content, and I guess the first thing I would say is that, Jay, I want to understand how you arrived at where you are. But before we do that, I have just a question I ask every guest, which is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
No, I read this last night and I was thinking about it. It would probably be, have you guys ever seen the movie Unbreakable with Bruce Willis?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'd want my superpower to be.
So super strength.
Just unbreakable. Like the movie started off with an epic train crash where everyone died and he walked out without a single injury. And then he discovered this, that he just couldn't drown, he couldn't break bones, he was just unbreakable. So that would definitely be it.
Hey, that's a great one, man. And if you do Jay Vincent's program, you'll become unbreakable.
Well, I never get injured, but if I get in a train crash, I'm toast.
All right. Well, from superhero or from superpowers to superhero origin stories, where did you originally grow up, and what was sort of your fitness journey through the years?
Growing up, sports, my father was a semi-pro football player, and that was like his favorite thing in the world. And I never really played. I never got into football till I was in about 5th or 6th grade, because they discovered I used to play soccer when I was younger, or football, as they say in Europe. And I was so much faster than everybody that it was like unfair. Like they wouldn't even let me play with the kids because I was just 15 steps ahead of everybody. So my uncle and my father, they're like, holy shit, there's something going on with this kid. Why is he such a fast runner? So like, we should get him into football. So they bribed me. If you guys remember Razor scooters, remember how cool they were? My uncle bribed me to, he said, I'll buy you a Razor scooter if you play football and you don't quit, because they wanted me to play so bad and I didn't want to. I said, okay. So 6th grade, I started playing football and I just like couldn't be tackled. It was like bizarre. It was unfair. It was like unfair all the way up into high school, through high school. It was like playing with a bunch of babies, because my physical capacity genetically was just different universe. So once you get into high school and you start to play, you're playing football, weight training becomes part of that. We had weight training workouts, and of course, I wanted to play in college. So, I was trying to put mass on. I was only about 162, 63 pounds. So, playing running back and defensive back, I was undersized, but 17 years old. So I'm like, I got to put some mass on. So I started weight training, and, slowly but surely started to put some mass on. So that's kind of how I got into it. It just became a part of life. It's like you played football and you lifted weights.
Right. Good question on that, though. What was your body type like? Were you naturally more thin?
No, I was naturally muscular, but not like beefy. I mean, when I was 17, so I went into high school at about 162 pounds. I graduated at about 188. So it's like, as I matured, I blew up. But I always had very broad shoulders, round muscle bellies. I broke my collarbone when I was in 7th grade and went to the orthopedics. And I'm standing there with my shirt off, and he looks to my father and he goes, your son looks like a middleweight. And I was like 13 at the time. So I always knew I had the genetics, you know what I mean? It wasn't until I, started to get a little older, I started to put on a little bit of muscle. But, the best I was ever really able to do was like 190 pounds. It was like, and I was training pretty much how everybody trained, 6 days a week, back buys, chest tries, sometimes legs. And, I think from about 19 to 23, I didn't gain anything, nothing at all. I was, I had that growth spurt, and I'm like, well, I'm going to the gym, nothing's happening. And then, I'm working like this office job outside of college. I'm like, this sucks. I'm going to try to become a fitness model. Maybe it'll get me out of here. So I applied to an agency in New York City, and he's like, yeah, you look great, but you gotta add some muscle, or else nobody's going to book you. If you can add some muscle, you're going to be good.
And I should say that you're originally from the New York area.
Yeah, like central New York, Syracuse area. Yeah. So there I'm like, oh shit. So I had, in college I studied economics and minored in biology because it was just interesting to me. I knew it wouldn't, give me a job, but I was always good at science. So I started to dig into the science of exercise. And I discovered, initially by a guy named Dr. Doug McGuff, he wrote a book called Body by Science. In this book, essentially said, okay, let's look at all of the literature over the last 50 years and let's see what it says in terms of how we should be exercising. And in the back of it, there's like 150 papers that are cited. So I read this book and I go, holy shit, I've been doing it completely wrong. And he provided evidence behind it. Dr. Doug McGuff is an emergency room physician, exercise researcher, and he owns a training studio in South Carolina going on about 35 years. So he's been doing this a while. So I read the book. I learn the principles, which we're going to get into. I apply the principles. And within about 3-4 months, I'm 205 pounds. Jacked. And that was the only thing I changed. I ate a little healthier. And, after that happened, people started asking me, like, what the hell are you doing? And I started to explain it to them. Well, believe it or not, I think everybody's got it wrong. It was this book I read. I started looking at the literature and the research and the physiology. What people are doing is mostly folklore, and it doesn't really follow the physiology and the science. So I started teaching people this. And then shortly after, I worked in a training studio for some time. Then I opened my own training studio. Then I opened another training studio. And then COVID hit. And then I said, all right, screw this. I'm just going to start teaching this online. And now my entire business is I have programs, YouTube content, and coaching services that I just market across online. So now I do the same thing, just with a broader scale for really everybody in the entire world. I have clients everywhere.
When you say, you're doing 6 days of training and nothing was going on, and then you started doing what you were doing, which we will talk about in just a second. I had the same experience where you told me, you're like, he gave me all the things to do, and where I go to get my DEXA. Nothing against those guys, they're great. They're but it's one of those things where they had advised me as well on how I should train, and they were saying train the way you're talking about, like. And I showed you all that stuff. I was like, they're saying I should train 5 days a week, doing split this and this that, and then I gotta change my diet like this crazy thing, blah blah blah. And I didn't listen to him, thankfully. And I kind of like, and I was a little hesitant to do it your way. I was like, to be honest, I don't think I told you that, but I was like, I don't know, maybe Jay's full of shit. Like I do, because essentially, we'll get into it, but I train maybe once or twice a week for 30 minutes, and within like, what was it, 6 weeks or something, or 2 months, gained 10 pounds of muscle and lost 6 pounds of fat. And I didn't change, dude. And I didn't change my diet like really. I mean, I was eating healthier. Well, no, actually, that first month I was paranoid about the diet, so I went ahead and was still eating kind of like the super keto, carnivore, crazy thing that doesn't let you have any of the good stuff. You can't be having no cupcakes. You can't be having that bun on the burger. And then once I started getting the results, you were like, "Why don't you cut that shit out?" And then I was like, "All right, I'll try it your way." I started eating like a normal person. One, I didn't have the cravings that have had for years doing anything else. And two, I got better results than what I was doing before that. So when I say and it just blew my mind. And a big reason I wanted to have you on here is that there's so many myths about fitness, and you talk about it extensively, on your YouTube and all kinds of things all the time. And there's so many myths about how to train, and it's like, man, we're gonna get into it. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, anybody watching, like, you need to listen up, because this dude knows what he's talking about. All right.
I guess I'll say the main difference, though, that I didn't really mention because I was going to save it for later when we get into it. But like you said, the main difference was I cut it back from training 6 days a week, about an hour in the gym, doing the chest tries, back buys, all that bodybuilder stuff, to training 2 or 3 days a week and only doing 1 to 2 sets per exercise. And then my body grew, which is completely counterintuitive to mainstream fitness recommendations. But one thing we need to realize is there is the exercise science community and the fitness industry are not the same group of people. One is motivated by commercial interests. The other is motivated by knowledge. So where people are getting their information is from a source that is motivated purely by commercial interests. And with that, this type of knowledge or misinformation spreads very, very rapidly. And that is the primary reason why most people train the way they do. Because if you ask somebody why they train the way they do, it's normally because, well, I saw this online, or I read this, or my uncle showed me, or my cousin showed me. Most people's training modalities are inherited by somebody they know, not the Catch McCardle exercise physiology textbook. So that's the problem.
Well, let's get into it. So you started with what was his name again? McGuff is what you're saying. That's what you started reading him, and just from my understanding, and again, and just for anybody to know, like I'm not an expert in any of this shit. This is why I consult with Jay. But my understanding is that ultimately you came across HIT training, HIT, right? High intensity training. Not take out the extra I that you see a lot nowadays. Just high intensity training. Can you describe what that is, and then kind of how you discovered that, and maybe the physiology behind it, why it works?
So as you noticed, I didn't call it high intensity training, and I do this on purpose. I really refer to it as evidence-based training. And the reason is, in fitness, cults are established very, very quickly. Carnivore, vegan, CrossFit. So it's generally referred to as high intensity training, but I don't call it that because it's redundant. Training must be intense to be training. If it's not, that's not training. So it's like, what are we calling it? So it's generally referred to high intensity training. This term came from Dr. Ellington Darden, who was a researcher and worked for, he actually graduated from University of Florida, right up by you, which is why when you go into Gainesville Health and Fitness, where all the X-Force equipment is, his picture's right there. So he coined the term high intensity training almost by accident during a seminar once, and it just stuck. Okay. But before, they were just calling it strength training. So the principles behind this high intensity strength training approach, or the evidence-based training approach, is the primary driver of the exercise stimulus. Now, we must keep in mind that exercise is a stimulus. Your body does not change as you are exercising. There is literally nothing productive other than psychological endorphin-related side effects.
Sorry, I just want to stop there real quick. That was one thing that you taught me that I think is so crucial, man, which is the idea like there is a lot of people go to the gym and they do the exercise, but they don't work the muscles. They don't stimulate the actual muscles. And that's what's more important than doing 20 reps or doing, whatever it is.
Right, because we need to realize the exercise itself provides nothing of value. Nothing. It is merely a stimulus. And in fact, everything about the exercise is negative to your body. It produces damage, shearing forces, inflammation, reduction in recovery resources, loss of glycogen, dehydration, cortisol. Everything about exercise is actually bad. But the trade-off is accepting the negative side effects of the exercise itself for a positive adaptation if the stimulus is properly applied. So exercise itself is just a stimulus. It tells your body to do something. All right. And this is what people really need to realize, because if they're under the impression that if I go in the gym and I'm sculpting and toning, which is physiologically impossible, you don't sculpt or tone anything, then more would be better. Because people are under the impression that as I do these curls, I'm shaving fat off my arms. And as I do these curls, my arms are growing like blowing up a balloon. No, that's not it. Essentially, what we're doing is damaging the body, stressing the body, and this stimulates a biochemical response in your cells to tell your body to change if you give it adequate rest, adequate nutrition, hydration, stuff like that. So it must be intense in nature to stimulate these biochemical signals. Otherwise, it's just active work with muscle. Otherwise, you're doing, what most people are doing in the gym is akin to free manual labor. They're just using their body.
And one thing real quick I wanted to touch on with that is, because you were telling me I was getting bummed out when I was working out, because I was like, oh man, like I thought I worked my arms out really hard this last time. I was trying to get these guns, and then but only my chest got bigger, and I lost some fat on my gut, which is stupid. It's like, why, but that's part of it, right? Like your body, you're chemically changing your body, and how it responds to it is really, I mean, it just depends on the person.
Yeah. So that's where the sculpting and toning thing really confuses people, because people are under the impression they can make their body however, they can make it look however they want as long as they have the right program or enough time. This is wrong. Because if that were true, why do we have weight classes in sports instead of time classes? Because if anybody could be any type of physique or any type of body weight or any type of muscle, you just give them enough time and eventually they get there. But instead we have weight classes because we know there's something genetic to that. So, but anyway, just to categorize or summarize the points of high intensity training is intensity of effort in your exercises are the driving component for your response. The harder you train, the better your response. And we'll get into why that is. When you train very hard, you cannot tolerate as much exercise. Duh. It doesn't take a genius to understand that. You can walk a lot longer than you can sprint. We all know that. Sprinting is more intense. So you want to reduce the amount of exercise that you do in a workout to accommodate the intensity. You can't have both. So the research shows whether or not you train once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times a week, you will end up at the exact same destination, which is your genetic potential. You don't get better exercise results by training more, considering you're doing it correctly. So the principles are train really hard, focus on just that, training hard, which a lot of people pull back on how hard they train so they can spend more time in the gym, thinking that they're burning more fat and they're doing more whatever bullshit. Adjust the amount of exercise you do per workout to accommodate that intensity, and then adjust the frequency so that you don't overtrain. Those are the main principles. Now, one I like to add to it is use slower, more controlled repetitions. And the reason is the faster the repetition, the more external forces are placed on your connective tissues. The more external forces placed on your connective tissues, the more you beat them up, the more you wear them out, the more likely you are for a connective tissue injury. And this has been proven many, many times. Force equals mass times acceleration. If we increase acceleration, we increase force. That force is transmitted to your connective tissue and beats it up. All right. So the way I train and the way I train people is to control the weight. Take maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to lift the weight. Generally, even twice as long to lower the weight. And in fact, I was at an exercise seminar over the weekend. And Dr. James Fisher, who is one of the premier researchers on muscle growth and hypertrophy in the world at this point, he presented some new literature that shows that slowing down the lowering phase even more can promote even better improvements in strength and muscle growth. So now what I decided to do over the past couple of days is make it like unusually slow. And there's a lot of science behind why this happens, but it appears that slowing that negative down a lot is not only extremely beneficial for not beating the crap out of yourself, but can actually preferentially recruit fast twitch motor units and stimulate even more growth and strength. So those are the principles behind it. And these principles are not new. You know, this approach to training has been around since the 70s with Arthur Jones. That guy's sitting behind me in that picture. He created Nautilus equipment, which at some point or another people have probably seen. And that's what he focused on. Train really hard. Don't train too much. Don't train too often, because remember, this is a stimulus. And if your body cannot repair from the damage and the stress from the exercise, then it cannot produce an adaptation. Like, you got to look at exercise like going out in the sun. The sun is a stress on your skin. The ultraviolet light damages your skin, and your skin doesn't like it. That's why it hurts. As a response, your body produces more melanin to darken your skin, because darker surfaces reflect ultraviolet light. So it's a protective mechanism against that stress. Your body does the same thing. Your body gets stronger to protect itself against the stress of muscle fatigue. All right. The stronger your body is, the easier shit in the world is, obviously. And unless you allow that time for your body to make these adaptations and you implement a workout too soon, it's like going into the sun with a sunburn, expecting to get tan.
I mean, I will say that when we started training together, man, it was one 30-minute session a week. And I still was getting insane results. Now, so one part of that though is, I guess, you know, I mean, you were saying that when you first start training, you haven't been training in a while, you can see bigger, you know, because you haven't been stimulating anything, your body, it's a huge change. So it can actually lead to way more results. And then as you go along, you keep training, then you have times of plateaus and things like that, right? But I mean, initially I was doing 1 day a week, 30 minutes. But when you say high intensity, I think this is the key. You ain't playing, bro. Like, and I've learned how to do that through you. And I guess that is somewhat of an advantage. I've trained with you, because man, I was doing it alone, and then you got in there and I was like, oh shit, like I have been like I've been dicking around. Like when you got in there, and now I know enough, I've done it enough now to where I'm like, I can tell now, like, okay, I'm not getting it in hard enough. I gotta, you know, pump it up way hard. Because one of the things that happens, I think, that you showed me was when it starts getting tough, that's when you got to double down. Like when it starts like when you start feeling the burn, that's not the stop signal. That's you need to take everything you got in you, like a savage beat, like animal, you know, like you described it as someone's trying to kill your mom. Like, how would you behave if like someone's trying to kill your mom, like, and you were in the room? Like, it's taking everything to where like you literally cannot move your, you know, whatever you're working out, you cannot move it no matter how hard you try. And that's when you know you're done.
Yeah. So this is because the goal, if your goal is to build strength. Now let's clarify one thing first. There's no difference in training for strength and training for muscle. Anyone who says there is a difference is a fucking moron. They're clueless. Okay. Muscle grows as a side effect of improving muscular strength. All right. So essentially what happens is your body doesn't care about how big its muscles are. Bigger muscles actually are disadvantageous to survival. Bigger muscles require more calories, harder to dissipate heat. More body weight requires more effort to move your body around, thereby reducing metabolic efficiency. More muscles is a bad thing. That's why most people don't grow big muscles. Evolutionarily, it's a negative adaptation. Your body actually wants to get as strong as possible with as little muscle as possible. All right. So what happens is your body wants to get strong. As a side effect of improving strength, you have filaments in your muscles called titin, actin, and myosin. The actin and myosin filaments are the ones that connect to each other and produce strength. It's just like Velcro. When you hook two pieces of Velcro together, it's virtually the same thing. Now, what happens is when you stimulate an improvement in muscular strength, your body adds more myosin. The myosin are like the hooks that grab onto the Velcro. If you look at Velcro very, very closely, you got the fuzz, which is the material, and then you have all these little hooks that hook onto the threads. So when you grow muscle, you're growing hooks. You're growing more things that could hook onto those threads, making the amount of force the muscle can produce greater. So when we add more of these hooks, more of these myosin, you got to make room for them. So the muscle cell expands in size to accommodate more myosin. And now you have bigger muscles. It is a side effect of strength. You cannot train for one or the other. Now, the reason people think you can train for one or the other is because they look at selection bias. You look at the type of people who gravitate towards strength sports like powerlifting, strongman. They're like big and fat generally. Then you look at people who gravitate towards bodybuilding. They don't look like they're lifting that much weight, but they're much more muscular. Well, and here's the reason. Generally, the powerlifters had bad genetics for bodybuilding. They were always kind of fat and fluffy. So they gravitated towards just lifting weight because they never looked good when they did lift weights. So now you're left with a bunch of people who are very strong but don't really look good. Because if they did look good, they'd be over at bodybuilding. But they just have genetics that don't allow them to do that. Then you look at the bodybuilding side. All these people look really, really good no matter what they do. And it doesn't benefit them to lift a shitload of weight. So they don't. And then what people do is they say, oh, well, bodybuilders don't lift that much weight, so they're building for muscle growth. And strong men lift a lot of weight, so they're building for strength. No, dummy. It's called selection bias. You're looking at a small sample size of elite individuals and contributing what they do to how they look. They would be no different than looking at the NBA and saying, well, dribbling up and down a wood floor and shooting a ball into a basket makes you tall. No. Tall people gravitate towards basketball. It's that simple. So the goal is we want to make your muscles stronger. All right. We want to stimulate this stress in as many muscle fibers as possible. Back in 1957, there was a Harvard neurologist named Dr. Elwood Henneman coined something called the Henneman size principle. What he found was the harder you push your body, the more intent you put behind your muscle contractions. Basically, the harder you try, the more muscle fibers your nervous system excites, meaning turns on. So if your goal is to stimulate the most muscle growth and the most muscle strength, you obviously want to stimulate the most muscles, correct? Well, Dr. Elwood Henneman says, well, it's an accepted neurological phenomenon that you use the most muscle when you push the hardest. So thereby, it makes sense, push really hard to stimulate as many muscles as possible to stimulate the most muscle growth as possible. And that's where the high intensity training approach comes from. It just comes off of basic neurology and basic physiology. So that is why you want to push very, very hard. A lot of people have a hard time doing this because, like you said, everything your body's telling you to stop. When you get to the point where you want to stop the exercise is literally the point where the exercise begins, because it's that discomfort where you start to push your body hard and recruit all those muscle fibers you've been trying to recruit and stimulate. Now, can you see results stopping short? Of course. But most people are probably getting 60 to 70% of their potential by doing that. If you want that other 30%, the maximum your body is capable of, you have to push hard. So that's the other thing. You see a lot of people who do different things and they still look good. Okay, well, remember the genetics thing. Some people have very favorable genetics for muscle growth, just like some people have very favorable genetics for getting dark skin or growing body hair.
I want to stop you real quick. With the genetic side of things, I mean, how much does genetics play a factor in your body composition and what you're capable of doing in terms of gaining muscle and all kinds of stuff?
In terms of muscle growth, it's everything.
Wow. Okay.
In terms of body composition, however, it plays a role, but not as much of a role. For instance, everybody can be fit. Not everybody can be shredded. That's usually genetic predispositions because we're born with a certain number of fat cells. Okay, the people who get very, very obese are born with somewhere probably around 200 to 300 billion fat cells. Unless you surgically remove them, you can't get rid of fat cells. They're like balloons. Either they're deflated or inflated. When they're inflated, you're obese. When they're deflated, you're lean. All right. When you put stuff in them, you get fat. The people who are just genetically ripped, no matter what they eat, probably have around 10 to 15 billion fat cells. We're talking about like a fifth or a tenth. And this is something you can't really change. But then there comes other genetic predispositions like beta receptors and alpha receptors, insulin sensitivity. Is where the fat cells accumulate. If you notice, some people have a lot of fat in one area but not another. Well, they were born with more cells there. They're born with more balloons there. Now you could surgically remove the balloons, but a lot of the times when people do this, they just pile fat on somewhere else. So that's not a very good approach. But genetics, and this is the problem with the fitness industry too, is that genetics are virtually everything with muscle growth. But they're also quite important with, body composition. How your body looks as a result of exercise, whether you have big shoulders, big arms, big chest, big legs, or small arms and big chest, or small shoulders and big legs. It's genetics. Sorry. That's not very marketable, but this is what it is.
Accept yourself, goats. All right, just accept yourself.
You gotta. I mean, Western society has, idolized these. I mean, shit. They've been doing it for thousands of years. Look at ancient Roman statues. We tend to value things that are rare. Diamonds are fucking useless, but they're expensive. Water, we don't really value water because it's everywhere, although it's crucial for survival. So the reason why people desire these muscular lean physiques is because they're rare. If everybody was jacked and shredded, we wouldn't give a shit. But the fact is, it's so rare that we value it. And the fitness industry knows this. And they know you will buy every single thing you can get your hands on chasing that dream. But when I say all this doesn't mean you can't be fit.
No, yeah, I have a question about this because, if you look at old photos of Americans on the beach, like everyone was pretty shredded. They were pretty fit. They were all pretty athletic. Do you think a lot of this current state of everything has to do with food and?
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. Like I was just alluding to, everybody can be fit.
Yeah.
All right. What I mean genetically, when it comes to, I'm talking about people who look like jacked fitness models, the people you see on Instagram. That's all genetics, and that's rare. Everybody can be fit for the most part. Obviously, there's bell curve. And I think most of that is caused by
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
No, the reason most people are out of shape, 50s compared to now, I think, these are my opinions. My opinions are culture, and fat acceptance. So culturally, people, we have a lot more access to calorie dense foods now than we did in the 50s. In the 50s, you had your hot dog stands and your diners and restaurants and stuff, but that was like an occasional thing. People didn't eat at those daily. Now there are 3, 4, 5 fast food places at the beginning of my neighborhood. There's a Wendy's, a McDonald's, a Culver's, a Subway, and a Wawa, which is essentially a fast food restaurant. Now it's everywhere. So the convenience and the access to huge amount of calories, I think, is what's getting people. Because now we can walk down the street and have 2,000 calories, or in the past, we probably weren't going to expend the energy making a ridiculous meal every 4 times a day to eat all that. And plus, I think it's the culture too. People, we've made being obese and unhealthy, like, people have tried to make it okay. I mean, it's just unhealthy. It's unhealthy. I mean, it's unhealthy both physiologically and psychologically. I mean, people who are morbidly obese, they don't want to be. You kidding me? It's just nonsense. So I think that's part of the reason.
I wanted to go back to on the flip side of it, what you were talking about before, and I kind of brought it up just now with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because let's get into the controversies. Like I want because there's a lot of myths that you dispel from a lot of different people pushing a lot of different programs. I almost want to just do it as a lightning round, but like there's so many things that you talk about. One of the biggest ones that we talked about is how Arnold Schwarzenegger totally distorted, everything related to building muscle and all that kind of stuff. Can you talk on that and kind of what happened there?
Well, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger, here's the thing. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I don't think he was ill-intentioned initially. Because from people I know who have met him, say he's the sweetest guy on the planet. So I don't think he did it to pull fast one on people. I think a lot of what he said, he genuinely believed, but it was wrong. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, his idol was a guy named Reg Park. All right, Reg Park was one of the first well-known bodybuilders of the 50s and 60s. He was like the only one. Now, Reg Park looked to monetize bodybuilding. He was like one of the first individuals to ever do so. There were no magazines back then. There were no videos. So what he did was he wrote books. And he wrote one book called The Secret Multi-Set Training System. Arnold Schwarzenegger modeled his training after Reg Park. Arnold Schwarzenegger won competitions, became popular. Him and Joe Weider teamed up and marketed the hell out of bodybuilding. So everybody looked at the way he trained, and he told them, this is how I train. Was it effective? Yes. Was it unbelievably excessive? Yes. But it worked for him because he had the genetics. All right. So most Arnold Schwarzenegger, and eventually, when people are doing something that works, they're not going to change it. What motivation would he have to change it? So Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of the first physiques everybody was in awe at. And they were under the impression they could look like that too, as long as they did what he did. We didn't know anything about exercise at this point. Nothing. Nobody cared. So they started asking him what he did. He started, spreading his stuff. Joe Weider started coming out with magazines and articles about training in order to sell them supplements. So Joe Weider, he was the founder of, the IFBB and all the bodybuilding shows. His motivation was to use bodies like Arnold and these bodybuilders, have them tell their training regimes. So people would buy the magazines, read about their training regimes, and then order protein through the magazine. They were catalogs. They weren't magazines. They were catalogs like a Sears catalog that you could order things through. And the way they drew them in was through the articles of these impressive physiques. Now that's where most people got their training recommendations from, and then it stuck. It stuck forever. Yeah. In the earlier 1900s, most of the strong men did single set training. Did something very similar to what I do. But when the bodybuilding community got popular, that's when they started doing all this other stuff. But also there was a movie that came out in the 70s called Pumping Iron. I think it was 1976, 1975. And it was like a documentary film that followed Arnold Schwarzenegger around and other top bodybuilders. And this is what really propelled muscles into, the culture. And for dramatic effect and entertainment value, Arnold Schwarzenegger exaggerated a lot. Arnold Schwarzenegger in that movie, he created a character intentionally. He was said to have created this character because he was interested in getting movie roles. So he wanted to come off as this cocky, sly, type of guy. Well, the thing is, in person, he's not even like that. He's actually a sweetheart. And it worked. I mean, I've seen all of his movies. And so he exaggerated some things. He said, I go to the gym for 3 hours, twice a day, blah, 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 blah. He wanted to make the thing entertaining. He wanted it to seem unusual and crazy that he spends all his time in the gym. And yeah, it was all kind of made up for entertainment value. Whether or not he actually did that, who the hell knows? Whether or not his training programs are even his, who knows? A lot of times in the Weider magazines, they would just make up programs and stick a bodybuilder's face on it and say he did it when it wasn't even his program. And they still do that to this day, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one question I have before we get into some of these myths that I want you to dispel, because man, there's so many of them. But why do you think people still like you found out all the science? You're able to say, okay, you know, I mean, I still do I do, Jay. I'm sorry, Jay. I still do 3 sets. Just because that last set, I try to go hard on that last set and make sure the tank's empty. But you found out everything. Okay, you don't have to do 100 things. Just okay, like 1 set to failure, 1 or 2 sets to failure. High weight, slow. Because like for me, I'm like, how many times I've done whatever shit fast, and then I get injured, and then like, okay, well, I'm going to be out of the gym for 2 weeks, and that's enough to get me to stop forever. So the slow thing is so cool. It's like, all right, like I was doing it the other day, and I was sensing something was tweaking. So I was like, okay, let me just slow a little more and then ease into it. And then boom, went through it. No, if I in the back in the day, I would have just pushed or gone crazy, and it would have probably caused an injury. So like the slow training, the other thing I notice in the gym all the time now, which drives me crazy, is that everybody does full range extension. Maybe you can talk on that. Like everybody does full range extension. I saw an old dude doing this, like with the wire bar the other day, and I was like, bro, you just have to do like, it's almost like 90 degrees, like just do that. You don't need to fucking, I don't know. Can you speak on that? Like that's maybe one of the myths, that you got to do this full range of motion, or just range of motion in general.
Let's start off. First of all, why don't more people train this way? It's lack of exposure to the information, period. It's just not a lot of people are exposed to this. Mike Mencher, Ellington Darden, Drew Bay, Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia, he trained this way. Just not a lot of exposure. That's all. The range of motion thing, again, it's old beliefs. So back in the day, but we still learn things about this. Like there was a study published literally Friday finding, some new things. We know pretty much all there is to know practically about how to stimulate your muscles to grow. We're not going to find any new magic bullet of something you could do in the gym that's going to propel you into the Incredible Hulk. Not going to happen. But it's only within about the last 10 or 15 years we found that range of motion is irrelevant. But back when a lot of people started training, they were told, do the full range of motion, full range of motion. Well, what even is a full range of motion? Is it the absolute full range that a joint is capable of? Nobody's doing that. Hell no. That would hurt. But, adequate range of motion. So the way to explain this is, I'll ask all you guys this question. Maybe not Ravine, because I'm not going to ask them. What does a muscle do?
What it contracts and expands.
Okay.
I would say moves your body.
That's the common. What do you think? Squeezes. Okay. Squeezes, moves, expands, and contracts, right? That's what most people would say. Here's why it's wrong. Now, as I'm sitting here, am I using muscles? Am I moving? Okay. The function of a muscle is to produce force. Muscles are recruited to produce force. Now, if the amount of force the muscle produces exceeds the amount of resistance it's working against, we have concentric or positive movement. If the amount of force the muscle produces is less than the resistance it's contracting against, we have eccentric or negative movement. If there's no movement at all, we have isometric or static contraction. A muscle, its function is to produce force, which means if we want to stimulate a muscle to get stronger, we simply need to make it contract hard against resistance. Therefore, no movement is required at all. So when you understand that about muscles, And here's a good way to explain that. You know, all the fitness industry is talking about stabilize your muscles all the time, right? They balance on a Bosu ball or one leg or do some other bullshit circus act to work their stabilizer muscles, right? Are those muscles moving? No. So the same people who say you need range of motion to strengthen or train a muscle are the same people doing stability exercises, training muscles that are not moving. So it's evident that a muscle does not need to move in order to work against resistance or stimulate. This is why the range of motion used in terms of overall muscle growth, if sets are done with a high intensity of effort to failure, does not matter. Now, if you took a random individual who doesn't train very hard, doesn't train to failure or high intensity, if you took two groups, one trained with full range of motion, one trained with a short range of motion, the full range of motion would see better results because it's harder. But if we controlled the intensity, we had everybody train hard, no difference in improvement in muscular size or strength when it comes to less range of motion. And also, we need to keep in mind how we measure strength. Okay, we don't measure strength by a bench press, a squat, or a deadlift. Those are technical lifts. They require a combination of skill and strength. The way exercise scientists properly measure strength is with isometric torque, contracting against something that doesn't move, measuring the force output of the muscle. That requires no skill. So that is a more effective way to measure strength. If you're using a bench press, since there's a skill component, individuals who practice a bench press with a full range of motion and then are tested with a bench press with a full range of motion will do better because their skill is acquired through the full range of motion.
Okay, so this is something else, right? That you advocate for differently than most people who train, most trainers. Most trainers want you to do the free weights. You know, it's free weight. Like you have to have more control to do the weight. That's going to make you more strong. You're the opposite, which I love, which is that, hey, get a machine weight and just do, be precise with it, or be specific with it. It makes, in fact, not only is it not, it makes no difference. In fact, the fact that you're in a controlled, you're the fact that you're stimulating your muscles in a controlled way using a machine is actually better than trying to do it with free weight. Would you agree? Am I summarizing that correctly?
I wouldn't say it's better necessarily. The answer with exercise is everything depends. So if an individual is very unstable and sloppy and jerky with a free weight, they're going to be better off on a machine. But if you took an individual who could control free weights the way they can control a machine, you're going to have the same results. There's really no difference. There's no difference in the long run at all when it comes to muscle growth and strength between machines and free weights. Your body doesn't know the difference. We're contracting the muscles against resistance. Now, where people think there is a difference is functional strength, which is a completely made up term. Okay, if you look at the Catch McCardle exercise physiology book, you type in functional strength, you're not going to see it in there. If you open the NASM personal training book, you're going to see functional strength all over the place because they made it up. They completely made it up. Functional strength is under the assumption that the skills acquired in exercise transfer to other skills, which there is zero evidence for. This is a book written by Brent Rushell. He's a motor learning professor at, I believe, UCLA maybe. And he wrote this book called Training for Sports and Fitness. He goes over all the research, all the physiology. There's no such thing as functional training. Moving free weights around just because it sort of looks like something else you would do does not make you better in that other skill. That's called, there's positive, negative, and indifferent skill transfer. A positive skill transfer is when you practice an activity and it improves your ability to do that activity. Negative skill transfer is when practicing a particular activity reduces your ability to do another activity. For instance, if I were to practice, let's say, a typing contest on this keyboard, my MacBook, and then I have to do a competition on like a desktop keyboard that I've never used before, I'm going to fuck up all over the place. And you guys know how that is. Ever try using a keyboard you're not used to and you mess up? That's called negative skill transfer. Practicing skills that too closely resemble other skills will have a negative transfer and make you worse.
So just to be clear on that, so what you're saying, or what I'm understanding what you're saying is, because you have people who train to run marathons, you have people who train to do all these different things, but what you're saying is that that's a skill that you're learning how to do. The actual like building a muscle or whatever is really just still at the end of the day, it's about what are you stimulating in your body. You know what I'm saying? They're you can almost separate the two. You could have someone who is really skilled at doing something that is overall unhealthy, but they know how to do that particular physical skill. And then you can have someone who's really, healthy, but they're not skilled physiologically or just, I don't know, I guess mentally.
Or just because you're doing the thing, like for example, let's say you work construction and every day you have to lift steel beams. If you go to the gym and you lift free weights in the same fashion that you lift steel beams, it is not going to make lifting steel beams easier. It could actually impact you negatively because you are used to the way the weights feel in your hands in comparison to how the actual steel beam would feel.
Correct. That's exactly correct. In fact, this book referenced a study done in 1976 where it took professional rowers, the rowers, put them on one of those rowing machines that you see in CrossFit gyms, and saw that their rowing force and speed was reduced after training on the rower for a period of time.
I actually know a couple of rowers, and they refuse to use the rowing machines that are in the gyms for that reason. They say it is not water. You are not in water. You will only get worse. When they first started going to a gym that had them, they tried and their times got worse.
Told you. Yeah. And you see this everywhere too. You see this like golf training, people doing all this silly golf shit. You see it with baseball. You know how before they step up to the plate, they put the weight on the bat because it makes the bat feel lighter and it makes them believe they're swinging the bat faster, but all it's doing is screwing their timing up. Because there's a very particular sequence in which the muscles must be recruited with a very particular amount of force to do that very particular skill. Now, when you put a weight on the end of that bat, you change all of that. And then you step up to the plate and you're worse. But that, baseball is one of the most superstitious sports out there. You see everybody doing their shit before they.
I got a question for you. So what about like so fighting, obviously in a boxing gym, you train with heavy gloves, and when you compete, they're like 10 to 12 ounces, but your training gloves are 16 to 18 ounces. So do you think that that's kind of the same effect, or is it a little different with the mechanics?
Yeah, boxing is also very superstitious and tradition based. That would be the worst thing you could do. Because your body is adapting to the timing of a 16-ounce glove. Then when you use a completely different glove, it would be like, again, taking a test with a completely different keyboard.
Well, we know muscle memory is a thing, right? So if your muscle is used to doing a thing away with a certain amount of weight, and then you change that just minimally, you're going to get negative effects.
Yeah. Muscle memory is just a layman's term for skill transfer. So, a skill, the purpose of a skill is to make work easier. That's why we have skills. We have skills to make specific activities require less energy, less thought energy, less physical energy, less wear and tear, less inflammation. So that's the actual purpose of the skill, is to make it easier. So exercise should try to eliminate skill as much as possible because skill makes it easier. And the goal of exercise is to place a heavy demand on your body. So if there's a skill involved that is reducing that demand, then you're heading in the opposite direction. And this is something, I'm an assistant strength coach at Florida State University for the men's basketball team. And there isn't a single deadlift platform. There isn't a single bench press, squat rack, none of that functional training bullshit. There isn't a single BOSU ball in there. Because Mike Bradley, who's been the strength coach for 32 years, knows this. But as of late, all these guys kind of retired. Mike Bradley's 58 years old. He's probably getting close to retiring. Believe it or not, this approach to training was very widely done in professional sports in the late 90s, early 2000s. I met a guy over the weekend that worked for the Minnesota Vikings for a few years. They did this. Cincinnati Bengals, Houston Texans. But all those guys retired. And now the new guys came in. The new guys came in when Instagram and YouTube started putting out fitness information. They brought all their bullshit with them. And that's why everything is so different now.
Well, okay, so now we're talking about, you know, fighting and football and cardio sports, some would say. You do not believe in cardio. Is that accurate? Because you haven't got me on cardio. So what's your stance on
cardio? What people traditionally call cardio, no. For the reasons that people want to do cardio, no, I don't agree.
So by that you mean the idea of just like running on a treadmill, things like that. Like, I mean, you still believe in, like, you know, if you have a sport and you want to learn the skills, that you got to, you know, learn the skill, you know, in other words, how to run, how to, you know, in fighting, how to punch or whatever. But you're saying in general for training, building muscle mass, losing fat, all that kind of stuff, you're against any form of sort of like cardio type of thing.
I wouldn't say I'm against it, but it's not necessary. So again, people confuse cardio with skill transfer. So people are under the impression that you see this in boxing a lot and in other martial arts, people jog. I've never seen anybody jogging in a boxing ring in my life. I don't know about you guys. Well, Jake Paul was jogging a little bit the other day, but, you know, when people get better at jogging, they think that that is a general adaptation, a general improvement in cardio that transfers to other activities, but it does not. Another study performed in 1977 measured VO2 max between uphill skiers and maybe it was swimmers, I believe. And what they did was they found that when they practiced their particular sport, their VO2 max improved. But then when they put them on a treadmill, no improvement.
Interesting.
Their VO2 max was only improved in their specific skill.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. Like, if I think about it, you could be the best runner. I was a great runner as a kid, but that running cardio is not the same when you're in the ring, right? Like, if you want to be good at ring cardio, you need to be running gauntlets in the ring where you could just fight in the ring nonstop, because that's what is going to be realistic to the thing. But you can't just go run, be really good at running, and think that that really applies when you're throwing punches and moving and getting hit. It just changes the element, you know?
Remember that skill is something that makes work capacity or work easier. So in order to make the work of fighting easier, you need to improve the skill so it's less demanding on your body. In order to make running easier, you need to repeat the skill so it's less demanding on your body. Same goes for swimming, skiing, hiking, everything in the world. And again, remember, I was citing a study from the late 70s. We've known this for 50 years. But when we look at coaches, and this is true in fighting, the best coaches generally become the best coaches in people's eyes because of who they coach. So this guy coaches John Jones. This guy coaches Conor McGregor. Now they're the best coach. But they just ended up coaching somebody who was a freak and extremely good. It had nothing to do with their coaching method.
Yeah, like Mike Tyson's coach got lucky to train Mike Tyson, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Exactly it. So people look at their coaches and they attribute what their coaches are doing in terms of strength and conditioning to the individual success. While there's probably a lot of value in the skill component in teaching how to fight, but then when you look at the strength and conditioning stuff, it's completely useless. That's why you see people doing fucking Turkish get-ups, which I think is the dumbest, most useless poor excuse for an exercise ever created.
What is that? What is the Turkish get up? Is that
Essentially you hold a kettlebell, you like sit on the floor, and then you get up like without using your hands. And they're like, well, in fighting, you have to get up.
Do you lose your hands when you have to get up? Like somebody take your hands away?
I don't know. But somewhere along the line, some coach was doing it who coached somebody good, and then everybody started doing it.
I wrestled at a high school out here in Arizona that is like known top tier for its wrestlers. We ain't never did one of them fucking get ups. Not a single one of those ever. You know, you want to get up, then push the man off of you and get up. That's the best workout. Drill it.
But this is where some of this weird shit comes from. And it's even worse now with social media and Instagram, because now there's an incentive to come up with new stuff for views. So now people come up with new crazy nonsense. At Florida State, they've been doing the same exact workout for 32 years. They've had some really, really good teams, some mediocre teams, some bad teams. You know, but it's not the training program. It's generally the recruitment, the skills of the players, how they play together. You know, these are all the important aspects of competition, and lies in the ability to do the activity. The strength and conditioning really should be looked at as like body insurance. You're making your body stronger, more durable, so that way you could play the sport for longer and be more resistant to injury. Sure, here's the thing. There's very likely an improvement in athletic performance with improved muscular strength, but it hasn't been measured ever. It's assumed. How would you measure it? Are we going to take the Florida State basketball team this year, only strength train them and not have them practice one day? You could measure it. And that's the other thing about functional training. The whole thing is assumed. It's wishful thinking. People think that these functional exercises make people better athletes. Not only is there literally not a single shred of evidence to support that, there is a plethora of evidence that refutes that. There's a study done by Stuart Bruslow and Dave Smith in 2016 that explored explosive training and plyometrics and all this stuff and enhanced athletic performance. They found there's no connection between the two, and more evidence that refutes it. And again, if you wanted to test it, how could you? You couldn't possibly test it, because if functional training was that effective at making you a better athlete, then we just wouldn't have practice. We would just have practice in the weight room, and nobody's doing that.
But Jay, I mean, aren't they stretching their muscles and their joints and all that kind of stuff? Isn't stretching part of what allows an athlete or somebody to do so much more than just getting in the gym and just getting at it?
It's funny because there's no evidence to support that stretching reduces injury either. That was embodied by science. There was a case study that looked at about 3,000 people and found no relationship between stretching and reduction of injury. None. And there were several studies that found that stretching prior to doing an activity which requires a lot of explosiveness or strength reduces the muscle's ability to produce force. You will actually be weaker if you stretch prior to doing a strength test or a jump test. There was a study done where they tested vertical jumps, and they had one group stretch before the test, the other group after. The group that stretched did not jump as high.
Is that because you're prepping your muscles for like a different exercise, like kind of that same thing, like skill transfer, but not exactly? Where like you're getting it ready to do something easy, and then you go and do something hard, rather than just jumping?
It's because it dampens the response from something called the Golgi tendon organ in your tendons and the muscle spindles. So the Golgi tendon organ senses mechanical tension in the muscle and sends an involuntary signal to the nervous system to contract the muscle. And when you stretch, the loading of the muscle statically dampens that signal to the nervous system, which allows more range of motion. So if you put your arm out here, you feel it get tight, right? The Golgi tendon organ and the muscle spindles, which are inside your muscle fibers, sense this tension. Sends an involuntary signal to my nervous system to contract the muscle so I don't destroy my joint. Because if it didn't, my arm would just bend completely the other way. Now, if I leave it here long enough, the signal to my nervous system lessens and my joint goes further. That's all stretching is. It's entirely neurological. And if you want to do a cool test, get completely shit-faced drunk and see how flexible you are. You'll be 10 times more flexible when you're shit-faced drunk because alcohol dampens your nervous system.
Is that? I mean, not to get morbid, but is that why when there's drunk driving accidents, the driver often survives more than the other person?
Yes.
That's crazy. Stop stretching, people. All right.
Well, here's the thing. If you like stretching, stretch. All right. But is it necessary? So here's the thing. People don't have time to exercise because they think they have to do all this bullshit. They got to stretch for 20 minutes before. They got to stretch for 20 minutes afterwards. They got to do cardio. They got to do this. They got to do that. Nobody's got time for that. 90% of what they're doing is useless. If you like stretching, go stretch. If it feels good, go for it. There are activity-specific applications for stretching, and there's rehabilitative applications for stretching. Okay. But for general overall fitness, strength, physical capacity, it doesn't really do much of anything at all.
All right, Jay, I got two more questions because I know we're getting into it here. I got two more questions, and maybe Fresh and Deezy have a couple, but eating. Let's talk about diet. Okay. Like I said before, I've done every diet, all of them. Okay. And now I just eat like a normal fucking person. I had a burger yesterday, and I still psychologically was like, man, I shouldn't eat the bun. Like, and then there is a certain amount of like, I do feel sluggish or tired if I eat certain foods at certain times of day and all that. But I've been eating normal. Not only have I been eating normal since I started doing what you recommended, but I haven't had like insane cravings for anything. It's like startling. So can you explain kind of, by training the way that you're prescribing, why does that allow you to eat better without having to like do all these crazy diet things?
A lot of it comes down to metabolic improvements, obviously. One, most importantly, is an improvement in insulin sensitivity. So your muscle cells become more sensitive to insulin, and your fat cells become less sensitive to insulin. So you probably hear people talk about fasting for insulin sensitivity. And the reason that works is because if you don't eat shit for a long time, the amount of glucose in your bloodstream and in your muscles gets depleted. Your body wants more glucose in its muscles to survive. So it improves insulin sensitivity to suck in more glucose. The key component here is the emptying or reduction of glycogen in your muscle and glucose in your bloodstream. When you exercise extremely hard, you completely empty your glycogen in your muscles and you use a huge amount of glucose in your bloodstream. It just doesn't take you 24 hours of not eating. It takes you about 15 minutes of strength training. So all that comes down to insulin sensitivity. When you use all the glucose and glycogen, you become more insulin sensitive. Now, when you eat, your muscles are going to absorb more of that glucose. Less of it's going to hang around your bloodstream. You're going to have less insulin dips, less blood sugar dips, which are going to stimulate appetite. And then, when we train really hard, we add additional mitochondria. Now, if you remember back to like high school biology, the mitochondria, they called it the powerhouse of the cell, right? The mitochondria eats fatty acids. Well, not necessarily fatty acids. It eats acetyl-CoA, which is broken down from fatty acids, but it essentially eats byproducts of metabolism and turns it into energy. Now, if you have more of these powerhouses in your cell, it can consume more of these byproducts and make your metabolism run more efficiently. So now you've got more powerhouses eating up substrate. You've got your higher insulin sensitivity. Your ability to stabilize your blood sugar improves dramatically. And a lot of the times we get so hungry is because it's a drop of blood sugar because we're metabolically inefficient. And all that comes down to stressing your muscles really friggin' hard, because the metabolism occurs in the mitochondria and the cells of your muscles, of your tissues.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, man. I even went out partying a couple of nights and still good. So, you know, I'm not sure you're advocate for that, but I'm just saying you can be a normal person, people, if you just train the right way. You know, ideally you do the right things and, you know, really improve your health. But I'm just saying, you know, it's just so freeing, man. I can't tell you how, just in general, how appreciative I am of that. Cause it's like, after years of doing this like repressive, controlled, like weird stuff, it's like now I'm like, okay, I just train. Probably it's not easy training, but it's like healthy. I haven't gotten injured the entire time we've been training, and I haven't. And you know, it's once or twice a week. Sometimes, and that's the other thing you were saying. Like, don't train if you feel weird, don't train. Like, wait till you're good, get in there and get at it. And if that's once a week, so be it. You know, and I can say from my own evidence, you know, yeah, there've been times I've trained once a week. Some weeks I get 2 in because I feel fine, and you know, getting great results. I don't know if Fresh and Deezy, if you have any other questions. I just have one more question, but if you guys have any questions right now that you want to ask Jay.
Yeah, I got a bunch. Because you kind of talked about the health industry, and I was curious of what you think about certain pre-workout supplements, creatine, protein, you know, the caffeine that you take during with the pre-workouts, and a lot of like the different amino acids, stuff like that. What are beneficial, what's not really necessary. Just super important to me. I've always been interested in that, and I'm curious. I know there's a lot of money being made.
The best supplement, the supplement that seems to have the most benefit and the most evidence behind it is creatine. I take creatine every day, and I don't take it for a physical exercise adaptation purpose. I take it for the downstream cognitive improvements. And it's creatine has been linked to reduction in diseases like Parkinson's, MS, stuff like that. Creatine has been linked to reduction of cognitive decline. So there seems to be a lot of evidence just behind creatine from a longevity perspective. So I take that every day in a pill form, 5 grams. Okay. There is some exercise benefit to it too. It will generally give you, more intensity, more energy training in the gym. It's not going to really contribute to additional muscle growth or anything, but it could potentially make you stronger because it helps regenerate ATP more quickly. Amino acids are completely useless if you're eating protein, because protein is made up of amino acids. So if you're eating protein, you're taking additional amino acids, you're just paying for expensive urine. Protein supplements are helpful if you're not eating adequate protein. So say, your target protein intake is 150 grams a day. You're like, well, I can only really get in 2 meals and I'm only getting 120 grams of protein out of those meals. Well, drink a shake, get the other 30. But it's actually quite easy to reach your protein requirement through a couple of meals a day. We're talking 8 to 10 ounces of some kind of animal protein twice a day. You're going to get 90% of your requirement. You throw a shake in there, you're covered. All right. So we don't need protein muffins, protein pancakes, protein yogurt, protein cereal, protein this, protein that, blah, 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 blah. No, that's another marketing nonsense. The more protein is not better. Okay. Because it's like building material. If you have a blueprint for a 2,500 square foot house, but you bring enough building material for a 5,000 square foot house, where's the rest of the material going? It's going back. All right. You're just getting rid of it. It's waste. So you don't need to hammer protein like crazy. Pre-workouts. Pre-workouts help some people get the energy for training. It's mostly because of caffeine. All the other stuff in it doesn't do anything directly to enhance the adaptation. There's things like beta-alanine, sertraline, other vasodilators that expand your blood vessels during a workout, which may give you more energy. They'll definitely give you a better pump. But the pump associated with your workout doesn't have anything to do with the stimulus. So If you like pre-workout, take it. Is it going to enhance your results? No, unless it makes a significant difference in how hard you could train. And when you take pre-workout, you go in there and destroy it. And if you don't, you're lazy. Then fuck yeah, take it. you know. But I would say about 99% of the, we'll call them like bodybuilding supplements, are complete nonsense.
Like testosterone enhancers that are all natural, the deer antler velvet, all that random stuff. Like,
it may increase testosterone, but not to any noticeable degree.
fair.
So just because something increases testosterone doesn't mean it does it to a point where you're going to see the effects of it. So if you increase testosterone 5%, you know, it's not going to be like taking TRT and increasing testosterone 200%.
How do you feel about like SARMs, you know, like Ostarine, stuff that, you know, that's not as anabolic or not as androgenic, but
yeah, they work. But the things, they haven't been around long enough to see what kind of downstream side effects they have. I wouldn't touch them. Like the peptides and the SARMs and all that. Hey, you want to use it, your body, your choice, but I'm not taking that shit. No way. But the thing is, they affect the sensitivity of the androgen receptors, which do give you, or they affect the androgen receptor. I don't know if it's the sensitivity. I'm not too familiar with them, but they seem to work. But what's the long-term side effect of that? We don't know. So personally, I would not take them. But hey, if you want, go for it.
That was actually my last question, Jay. Do I need to get on TRT, bro? What do I gotta do? How do I do it? What are your thoughts on TRT and all these, and you know, RFK getting jacked at 70 years old? What's the story?
Well, RFK, I don't know if you know anything about the Kennedys, but they are like a family of purebreds. So I think it's mostly his genetics, because I know many men his age on TRT that do not look like that. Okay. Again, even TRT, there's genetic limits. TRT is bringing your testosterone up to the upper end of normal healthy ranges. These are not steroid cycles. For testosterone to have a steroid-like anabolic effect, you'd have to take, 5 to 10 times TRT levels, TRT doses. Okay, so when people look at TRT, they look at it like it's something that's going to make you super jacked. Now, if you're an individual who ends up being very sensitive to endogenous testosterone, it might. Everybody has different sensitivities, just like medicine. Some people are sensitive to caffeine. Some people are sensitive to spicy food. Some people are sensitive to Tylenol. Some people are sensitive to testosterone, and they just, you just never know. But when it comes to testosterone, my personal thoughts on it are, why not? I just don't see any convincing argument towards why you wouldn't want to be at the upper end of healthy normal ranges, because you're going to have more energy, you're going to have better sex drive, you're going to have better cognitive function, you're going to have more longevity, you're going to have a better body composition regardless. Are you going to look like RFK? No, probably not, but you're going to have a better body composition regardless. So we spend thousands of dollars on all this bullshit every year to have a little bit of help, and there's this other thing you could just do to get all those benefits about 20-fold. So my opinion on testosterone and TRT is, why the hell not? I don't really know anybody, like, out of my personal circle. I don't know anybody that's not on it. But again, I live in Florida, where you could drive down any street, walk into a clinic and get it. And here's the thing. I know tons and tons and tons of people on it. You wouldn't know. You just wouldn't know. So from the cognitive energy, the psychological, that apparently has a profound effect on mood and depression and stuff like that. It seems to be an ultimate life hack. But if you're going to take it for the sake of like trying to get jacked, you're going to be disappointed.
Interesting. Dang, boy. Maybe it's not what I thought it was going to be.
Well, remember I said it's, why not?
I thought my neck was going to be like, ugh, and I was going to be like,
I know, but how the way I look at it is like, don't you want to feel more energetic, more confident, mental clarity, excited.
I think we're getting to the end here. So I just want to remind everybody out there, maybe you've heard all this. First of all this information Jay's providing, it's all true. I'm seeing results in my own life. So I vouch for you, Jay. You're the first person, Jay, I've ever been like, we've had guests on the show and I like seeing new technologies and all that stuff. But with you, I can say personally, this man's speaking the truth. So if you're doubting anything he's saying, I say go try Jay's program and then you report back. All right. Or comment on this video and talk that shit, and Jay will come in and he'll comment and we'll figure it out. All right.
Well, here's the thing. None of this is my opinion. I don't have the luxury of having opinion. I just relay what the facts are. And if people do not like the facts, that's fine. You can continue to do whatever the heck it is you want to do. But for the individuals who are hurt, don't have a lot of time, who've not seen good results in the gym, you've tried everything else, why not try this? None of this is my opinion.
So I have a friend with Parkinson's, and he does things like Tai Chi to improve his fine motor skills and to get a little bit of a workout. But now he's finding, as far as the workout goes, he's plateauing. Do you think that this is something that he could do?
What do you mean plateauing?
Like he's not seeing any more results. Like he was seeing results in the beginning. He was losing weight. He was getting more fit, but now he's kind of just stagnant and he's still doing the same things.
Is weight loss his primary goal?
Weight loss, muscle gain.
Weight loss is almost entirely dependent on diet, calorie restriction. No exercise program is going to give you long-term sustainable weight loss. Because remember, metabolic efficiency and skill. All right, we need to reduce the amount of energy input to increase the amount of energy output overall over a long period of time. Now, a lot of people try to increase energy output by doing a lot of physical activity by forgetting that we are extremely metabolically efficient. And whatever activity you were doing for losing weight in the beginning, you learn as a skill, which reduces the amount of metabolic output from that activity over time. There's a guy named Dr. Erman Ponzer that wrote a book called Burn on this subject. And he found, let me ask you this, who do you think burns more energy per day? An indigenous African tribe that hunts and gathers for their food, or us in the Western culture sitting in our comfy computer chairs? You think we burn more sitting down? Well, most people would say the Hadza tribe that is more active and have to walk, or they walk on average 10 miles a day, would say they burn more energy because they're more active, right? Turns out we burn the exact same amount of energy. The hunter-gatherers who spend most of their day moving burn as much energy per day as we do sitting on our ass, and that's due to metabolic efficiency and restrained energy output over time. So your body actually adapts to activities, reducing the amount of energy you're burning during it. This is why exercise itself is not a good approach for long-term sustainable weight loss. He has to reduce his calories. In terms of a plateau in muscle growth and strength gain, it's because he's not training hard enough. Anything in the beginning will stimulate an adaptive response. You're in Toronto. If you're in Toronto all winter long and you come down here to Florida in March and you haven't seen the sun in 6 months, we put you outside, in 5 minutes, your skin's going to be red. When you are deconditioned, you'll respond to anything. Let's say you're here for 3 months, you get used to the sun, it's going to take a lot more sunlight in order to irritate your skin and get your skin to adapt. Same thing for exercise. If you are deconditioned, anything is going to work in the beginning. Anything. But because it works in the beginning, people become attached to it, thinking, oh, well, it worked in the beginning and, well, it's not working now. Maybe I need to eat more protein, blah, 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 blah. When you could have had a purely awful workout in the beginning and still saw results, what he needs to do is he needs to learn how to train more intensely, like through my program. I work with a lot of people who think they've hit their genetic potential for muscle growth. And then I have them send me their training programs. I tell them, dude, you're not even close. You're like barely scratching the surface. Then I teach them how to train properly. And usually within 4 weeks, Anywhere between 3 to 10 pounds of muscle growth. It happens like instantly because we're tapping into those motor units that they were never tapping into, and we're finally telling them to grow.
I have one more question because I feel like for people that maybe don't have a gym and don't have weights or anything, are body weight exercises to failure still gonna do everything you need them to do?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Bodyweight exercises are amazing. The fitness industry hijacked the term calisthenics and call them calisthenics now when it's not the correct term. Calisthenics are something like a jumping jack or a burpee. Okay. Those are fucking useless. Bodyweight exercises are extremely effective because, again, your body doesn't know where the resistance is coming from. The goal of an exercise is to provide resistance against the target muscle group in order to get it to contract hard and stimulate it. Now, if you're doing it with a chin-up bar versus a pull-down machine, your body doesn't know. If you're doing a push-up versus a chest press, doesn't know. Dips, doesn't know. There are some limitations to, training your lower body when it comes to bodyweight exercises, but I have a home workout that teaches you how to do that with something called static training, just contracting against something immovable until your muscles reach a huge level of fatigue. And I had a guy in my coaching group who came to me at 132 pounds at 35 years old. Now he's 37, he's 152 pounds. And he did not lift a single weight, only static training. And if you know anything about Bruce Lee, this is what Bruce Lee used to do back in the day. So yeah, you don't need a lot of equipment. I would say the gym, I would say without direct instruction from a trainer, if you're doing it on your own, most people see better results in the gym. Mostly because there are machines that are designed to challenge your muscles extremely hard, and because of a psychological factor. You're going in there to do a particular thing. There's nothing else you can do. You're probably going to train harder. You're probably going to try to impress the chick with the fat ass in the corner. You're probably just going to get better results because you're just going to put more intent and more effort into your workout in a gym. So I always recommend people just get to a gym if they can. But that doesn't mean you can't see results at home, because you can. Probably they're just not going to be as good, practically speaking.
Dang. Knowledge here. Anybody else got any well, we got Jay. Any other questions, anybody? If not, listen, Jay. First of all, thank you for hopping on stream. Thank you for dispelling so many myths. Oh yeah, I know. I don't even think we scratched the surface. But for anybody out there who is heard this and wants to reach out to Jay, we're gonna put all this information in the show notes, in the description. But what's the best place, Jay? Like, what would you recommend?
They can shoot me in, first of all, if you want to try this approach to training, I have a video system which teaches you, to people who have never heard of it before. It's called the Golden Era System. You can find that at goldenerasystem.com. It'll teach you how to do this approach. It'll teach you the exercises so you can get in the gym and just do it right away without having to read a 300-page book, like a lot of previous high-intensity trainers provided. If you want me to coach you personally, in which I'm going to unlock all the potential you have, I'll also give you a link to click to book a call with me to discuss that as well. Also follow me on Instagram, Jay Vincent Fitness, YouTube, Jay Vincent Fitness.
And if you go to the YouTube, you can actually see him training me in person. You're down in Florida, so you can get a sense of the kind of training you should do. But I vouch for somebody, even if they're not in Florida, they should fly in, at least do one session with you, because the level of intensity really, I think, is key. And until I started training with you, I did not understand how hard you have to go. You got to go hard. If you're going to do this system, you got to go fucking hard as fuck.
You're not going to learn how to push your body as hard as you ought to be on your own. Won't happen. I didn't learn on my own. And everyone I coached, once I taught them how to do it, their results were tremendous. I had high intensity trainers put me through a workout until I actually understood it. Several. workouts.
Well, listen, Jay, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to toast the goats on this show. You're a goat, man. In my opinion, I mean, you're telling the real truth here. There's so much bullshit in fitness. I've done it for so many years, so much bullshit in supplements and all this other stuff, diet and all that. And so everybody follow Jay, and listen, Fresh, what do the fatties out there got to do? I'm not talking about the women with the big booties. I'm talking about the dudes with the big guts. What they got to do?
Like, subscribe, follow, comment.
You know what? Yeah, comment. If you think Jay's full of shit, comment, bro. We'll get him in here. We'll get him talking.
They will, but they don't seem to think I'm full of shit up at Florida State University.
If you think he's full of shit, post a selfie, you fat ass.